What happens when one of radio's most fearless shock jocks dares to confront Hollywood royalty on live television? Buckle up, because what you're about to witness is more than just an interview. It's a televised collision of egos, truths, and uncomfortable questions no one saw coming. Meghan Markle walked into that studio expecting a friendly exchange. A few smiles, some applause, maybe a soft question or two about her charity work. But sitting across from her was a man who doesn't play by the rules. A man who thrives on asking what others won't dare to. That man was Howard Stern. And what unfolded next left the entire studio stunned. Before we dive in, make sure you smash that subscribe button and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Because after you hear this, you'll definitely have something to say about celebrity accountability and what it truly means to be authentic. The studio lights beamed as The View's iconic theme song faded out. The panel sat in their usual seats, Whoopi Goldberg at the helm, flanked by Joy Behar, Sunny Hostin, Sarah Haynes, and Alyssa Farah Griffin. It looked like any other day. But something was off. There was electricity in the air, a hum of anticipation that couldn't be ignored. "Welcome back to The View," Whoopi's voice rang out, gravelly and familiar. "Today, we're joined by a very special guest co-host, someone who's never been afraid to stir the pot, Howard Stern." The audience erupted into uncertain applause. Howard leaned in, flashing that mischievous grin. "Whoopi, you know me too well. I'm just here to ask what everyone else is too afraid to say." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. And speaking of asking tough questions, Joy Behar jumped in, trying to keep the mood light. "We've got Meghan Markle joining us next to talk about her latest initiatives." Sarah Haynes smiled. "I'm genuinely excited to hear more about her work with women's empowerment. She's been doing incredible things." Howard arched an eyebrow. "Well, this should be interesting." Sunny shot him a look. "Howard, please. Behave." Howard smirked. "Define behave." The cameras faded to black for a commercial break. And then, she arrived. Meghan Markle stepped onto the stage with practiced poise, her signature smile perfectly in place. She wore a crisp cream blazer, hair sleek, makeup flawless. The picture of polish and control. The audience welcomed her with thunderous applause as she took her seat. "Meghan, welcome to The View," Whoopi said warmly. "Thank you so much for having me," Meghan replied, her tone smooth, her posture immaculate. "I'm honored to be here." For the next few minutes, everything followed the script. The panel asked gentle questions about her recent charitable events, her podcast, her involvement in gender equity campaigns. Meghan answered each one like a seasoned diplomat, weaving in keywords like empowerment, resilience, authenticity. She was winning the room. Until Howard cleared his throat. "Meghan," he said, his tone light but cutting, "can I ask you something real?" "Of course, Howard," Meghan replied, still smiling, but just a little tighter now. Howard leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You talk a lot about authenticity, about speaking your truth. But how do you reconcile that with the fact that so much of your public persona is built on criticizing the very institution that made you famous?" Silence. The air was sucked out of the room. Meghan blinked. "I'm sorry. What exactly are you referring to?" Howard didn't miss a beat. "Come on, Meghan. Let's not play coy. You've made headlines for years now, talking about how the royal family mistreated you. And yet, you've also made millions off that very narrative. Exclusive interviews, Netflix deals, podcasts, books. It's all built around how badly you were treated. That's not authenticity. That's marketing." Alyssa Farah Griffin leaned in, alarmed. "Howard, maybe we should focus on Meghan's current work." No, hold on," Howard said, raising a hand. "This is exactly what I mean. Why is everyone so afraid to challenge her?" Meghan's expression shifted, still composed, but her jaw tightened. "I think you're misrepresenting my experience," she said evenly. "Am I?" Howard shot back. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've weaponized your personal grievances and turned them into a brand. And every time the story starts to fade, you find a new outlet to reignite it." The tension was razor-sharp. Joy Behar attempted to interject. "Howard's just trying to say—" "I can speak for myself, Joy," Howard interrupted. He turned back to Meghan. You've talked a lot about how media scrutiny affected your mental health. And listen, I take that seriously. That's real. But then you turn around and keep placing yourself right back in the spotlight. You're on TV right now. You're doing more media. How do you expect people to take your message seriously when your actions don't align with it? Meghan's face flushed. Howard, I think you're oversimplifying a very complex situation. Then simplify it for me, Howard said. Because to the average person watching at home, it looks like you want all the perks of celebrity, the praise, the platform, the profits, but none of the criticism. Sunny Hostin finally jumped in, voice firm. Howard, that's not fair. Meghan's experiences with the British press were extreme. Racism, bullying, mental health attacks. These weren't your everyday tabloid stories. Howard turned to Sunny. And with all due respect, Sunny, every celebrity deals with the press. That's part of the job. But not every celebrity builds a media empire off complaining about it for 5 straight years. Now even the crew was holding their breath. Cameramen leaned in. Producers scrambled behind the scenes. Meghan's posture stiffened. Her smile was gone. Howard, she said, her voice controlled but clipped, I think you're being deliberately provocative and completely missing the point. Howard Stern leaned in closer, his eyes narrowing slightly. The studio was dead silent, all eyes fixed on Meghan Markle. Then came the hammer. Your point seems to be that everyone should feel sorry for you, Howard said, his voice unflinching, because you married into one of the most famous families in the world and then found out that fame has downsides. That's not exactly breaking news, Meghan. The air shifted. Sarah Haynes jumped in, trying to cut the tension. Maybe we should. No, Sarah, Howard said, unwavering. This matters. He gestured toward the audience. We live in a time when tough questions make people nervous. When we're so afraid of being labeled or cancelled that we stop calling things what they are. But somebody has to say it when the emperor has no clothes. Meghan straightened in her seat, visibly tense. Are you calling me an emperor without clothes? I'm calling you someone who's built an entire brand around being wronged, Howard replied bluntly. While at the same time, you've profited off the very machine you say traumatized you. The audience gasped softly. There was no clapping, no laughter, just raw, silent shock. Meghan's jaw tensed. The mask of media training was slipping. Her voice was clipped now, controlled only by sheer will. I came here to talk about real issues, women's rights, equity, my foundation. And you should, Howard cut in. But if you're going to wear the crown of social justice warrior, then you better be ready to answer real questions. Because frankly, Meghan, your actions don't always match your words. Whoopi finally spoke up, her voice calm but firm. Howard, I think we need to remember Meghan is here to share her work, not to be put on trial. But Howard shook his head. Whoopi, I'm not saying her causes aren't important. They are. But we're not being honest about what's really going on here. Meghan's activism? It's been wrapped in layers of PR strategy. Carefully timed interviews. Selective leaks. Emotional appeals designed to shut down criticism. Meghan turned to face him directly, the smile long gone. Her tone was icy now. And what exactly are you implying? I'm not implying anything, Howard replied, voice sharpening. I'm saying it out loud. You've weaponized progressive language to create a shield. Anyone who challenges you, anyone who dares ask uncomfortable questions, is immediately labeled racist, sexist, or out of touch. That is absolutely false. Meghan snapped, her voice rising for the first time. I've never used those terms to dodge criticism. Howard let out a dry, bitter laugh. Come on, Meghan. Your husband sat down with Oprah and all but accused his own family of racism. And when multiple royal insiders came out and said those conversations didn't happen the way you described, you doubled down. Joy Behar, visibly rattled, leaned in. Maybe we should steer this back. No, Joy, Howard cut her off again. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Every time the narrative gets challenged, someone rushes in to clean it up, to soften it. But we need to stop being afraid of the truth. He turned back to Meghan. His tone, while still firm, grew colder. You went on international television and made claims that shook the world. And now we're expected to tiptoe around the fallout. Meghan was shaking slightly now. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Those were my lived experiences, Howard. You don't get to tell me how I felt. Howard didn't flinch. There's a difference between lived experiences and verifiable facts. You claimed you were denied mental health support. Yet palace records reportedly show you were offered multiple options and declined. That's not your truth. That's a contradiction. Sonny Hostin jumped in, clearly trying to soften the blow. Howard, I think you're being harsh. The royal family hasn't exactly been known for embracing outsiders. You're right, Howard nodded. Diana had legitimate grievances. So did Fergie. They were trapped for years. Controlled. Cut off. Meghan. She was there 18 months, and had an escape plan halfway through. That's not fair, Alyssa interjected quickly. Just because she left sooner doesn't mean her experience was any less real. I'm not saying her pain wasn't real, Howard clarified. I'm saying her response to it was calculated. The timelines don't lie. Meghan was already talking to royal biographers and laying media groundwork while she was still a working royal. That landed like a punch. Meghan's face hardened. You have no idea what I went through. You're right, Howard said. I wasn't there. But neither was Oprah. Neither were the journalists you fed your story to. Yet somehow, their version became gospel. They did their research, Meghan protested, her voice cracking just slightly. Howard leaned back, arms folded. No, they interviewed you and your inner circle. That's not journalism. That's PR. Real research involves hearing from everyone, including the people who disagree with you. But those voices never make it into your documentaries, do they? You've built a brand on selective storytelling. Sarah Haynes looked like she wanted to disappear. Howard, I think we're getting into really personal territory. Exactly, Howard replied. And that's the problem. We've made it personal when it should be about principles. Honesty. Accountability. Meghan was visibly trembling now. Her voice dropped almost to a whisper. Why are you attacking me? I'm not attacking you, Howard said, his tone shifting slightly. Not softer, but more serious. I'm questioning your public behavior. There's a difference. You made yourself a global figure. You inserted yourself into politics, media, global debates. And with that comes responsibility. Not just to say the right things, but to live them. Meghan's voice cracked ever so slightly, her polished exterior beginning to fracture. You've made your point, Howard, she said, her hands tightening in her lap. But the way you're doing it, it's cruel. Howard's brow lifted, sharp and incredulous. Cruel, he repeated. Meghan, do you want to know what's actually cruel? Cruel is using your massive platform to destroy people's reputations, people who can't defend themselves, just to craft a more sympathetic narrative. His voice grew more pointed. Your father. Your half-sister. Palace staff who can't speak publicly. You threw them all under the bus in service of your image. And none of them have Netflix specials or Spotify deals to tell their side. The air in the studio turned electric. Nobody breathed. Joy looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. Whoopi raised a hand. I think we need to take a commercial. No, Whoopi. Meghan cut her off, finding sudden resolve. Her voice was louder now, shaking but fierce. I want to respond to this. She turned to Howard with glassy eyes. You're making assumptions about my motivations that are unfair and honestly mean-spirited. Then enlighten me, Howard said coolly. Because from where I sit, it looks like you've turned family dysfunction into a monetized brand. Meghan inhaled sharply. My motivation is to use my platform to help people. Help them do what, exactly? Howard pressed. Because it seems like the primary thing your platform has accomplished is making people feel bad for you. Where are the results? What's changed because of all this? Joy Behar jumped in. Meghan's worked with several organizations on causes that matter. Great, Howard nodded. Name one measurable outcome. Joy hesitated. The silence that followed was deafening. Not a photo op. Not an Instagram quote. One concrete result. One policy change. One life saved. One law passed. One systemic shift. Anything. Meghan opened her mouth, paused, then tried again. Nothing. Howard shook his head slowly. "That's what I thought," he said. His voice wasn't cruel now, it was just tired. "You've mastered the language of activism without ever doing the heavy lifting. You talk about issues endlessly, but where's the follow-through?" "That's not true," Meghan said quietly, voice trembling. "I've partnered with dozens of organizations. I've funded initiatives." "Partnering isn't progress," Howard interrupted. "Showing up in a designer coat and delivering a speech to a camera isn't changing lives. It's content. You say you're advocating for mental health, for women's rights, for equity. Where's the proof? What actual change have you driven?" Sonny Hostin leaned toward the producer, signaling urgently off-camera. "Maybe we should move to our next." "Why?" Howard snapped, eyes never leaving Meghan. "Because I'm asking questions that don't have easy answers? Because the person being questioned is crying." He turned to the camera. "This is the problem. We've created a world where some people are too famous, too fragile, or too important to be challenged. And the rest of us are just supposed to nod along and pretend it all makes sense." Tears were openly falling down Meghan's face now. "Howard, this is incredibly hurtful," she said through clenched teeth. "I came here to talk about hope and healing, and you've turned it into a personal attack." Howard didn't raise his voice. He didn't lean in. But the weight of his words hit like a hammer. "I'm not attacking you, Meghan. I'm challenging the public image you've so carefully crafted. The one that says, 'Feel sorry for me. I'm a victim of everything.'" "That's not fair," she whispered. "You don't know what I've lived through." "You're right. I don't. But I do know this. Every time someone asks you to explain your choices, your default is tears, or accusations, or deflection. You cry, the interview ends, and you walk away as the misunderstood heroine." "That's not true," Meghan sobbed. "I'm crying because you're being needlessly cruel." "Or maybe," Howard said, his voice now calm and cutting, "you're just not used to being held accountable." "Not really." Alyssa Farah Griffin, visibly shaken, finally spoke up. "Howard, I understand tough questions. But making someone break down on national television isn't journalism, it's cruelty." Howard turned sharply toward her. "No, Alyssa. What's cruel is pretending this is a serious conversation while spoon-feeding celebrities praise. When was the last time someone on this show actually pushed back? Asked for evidence? Demanded numbers?" Whoopi's voice was lower now, tinged with anger. "Howard, this is our show, and you're stepping way out of bounds." "Am I?" Howard challenged. "Because the way I see it, I'm treating Meghan like any other public figure who's made massive public claims. If she wants to be taken seriously as a leader, an advocate, an intellectual, then she should be ready for real questions." He turned back to Meghan. "So here's one. Do you stand by your claim that you knew nothing about the royal family before you married Harry?" Meghan blinked, her face frozen in disbelief. "Yes," she said, her voice barely audible. "I didn't know what I was getting into." Howard let out a single, disbelieving laugh. "Really? Because there are old posts from your now-deleted Instagram where you talk about Diana. You were following royal gossip accounts before you even met Harry. You shared pictures, quotes, commentary. So which version is true? The innocent outsider who knew nothing? Or the woman who was fascinated by the crown and curated a fairy tale entrance?" Meghan's head shook weakly. "That's taken out of context." Howard leaned forward slightly, eyes locked in. "Taken out of context? Meghan, those posts are dated. Public. Archived. You talked about how much you admired Diana. Long before you ever met Harry. But you sat across from Oprah and said you didn't even Google him." Howard Stern shocks The View. Meghan Markle storms OFF after brutal showdown. The studio was electric when Howard Stern stepped onto The View. No filters. No holding back. Sitting across from Meghan Markle, he wasted no time cutting through the carefully crafted image she's held onto for years. "You want the fame, the titles, the spotlight, Howard said, his voice cold. But none of the scrutiny that comes with it. The room froze. Meghan fired back, saying she only wanted her story told fairly. But Howard didn't flinch. Every celebrity has a story, Meghan, he snapped. But most don't build their entire brand around victimhood. Sonny Hostin tried to jump in, calling Howard's comments unfair. But Stern turned sharply. It's not unfair to ask why someone keeps dragging the same story into every interview. Whoopi's eyes darted. Joy Behar looked stunned. The audience gasped. Meghan's face turned red. "This is toxic," she whispered into her mic. And then, she stood up. Cameras caught the moment as she walked off the set, shaking her head, visibly fuming. Howard leaned back, smirking. "This isn't Buckingham Palace," he said. "This is real TV." It was the most explosive moment The View had seen in years.